Yep.
Hi, I'm Lisa Anderson, President of LMA Consulting Group, and I'm thrilled to be here today with our uh, global supply chain think tank colleagues, supply chain experts from around the world, and leadership experts from around the world to talk about what's happening in business as during these volatile and uncertain times, and then what we can be doing to be successful going forward, what leadership and executive uh, positioning should we be taking, and what other strategies for success? So that's our topic today, and I'm thrilled to be joined. I'm Lisa Anderson from Claremont, California, and we have David Ogilvie from Australia. We have Diane Garcia from Phoenix, Arizona, and Karen Wilson Starks from Colorado. And so we'll, each of us can introduce ourselves in more detail, but I'm looking forward to it. And so from that point of view, I guess we'll start off with perhaps each of us talking a little bit about what we see happening in this business environment. I guess very briefly, I'm seeing that, from a manufacturing perspective, the US has been in a recession since late 2022. So that's a significant period of time. Backlogs really dropped off somewhere in 2024. And last year was quite the struggle for manufacturing overall. However, we are seeing with the recent tax laws that have gone into place with some advantages, interest rate improvements over time, and stabilization from the tariffs, we're starting to see that sales quotes, orders, and new businesses starting to ramp up heavily in our with our client base. I guess from that point of view, maybe we'll go to Diane next, stay in the U.S., and then we'll go to Australia after that. So, Diane, what are you seeing?
Yep. I'm Diane Garcia. I would say very similar. The only thing I'd add is that we're depending on the industry. So some of the clients that we're working with related to data centers have been, busy and getting busier and not able to keep up with the amount of capacity that's needed, or working to see how they can add in additional capacity and visibility views.
Absolutely. And actually, the other thing that we are seeing is that profitability is making a return. So, when post-COVID, folks were just looking for product, regardless of what they had to pay for it. Not that they wanted to pay more, but they were willing to. Now they're being more discerning about the price for the product, unless, like you said, there's a data center type of scenario they're interested in, scaling quickly. But that is becoming a bigger topic. How about you, Karen? What are you seeing in your neck of the woods, or the industries that you've been working with most lately?
And let me just mention, I'm Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, President and CEO of Transleadership Incorporated. I work with large global corporation executives, and we are really focused on executive succession and transition in organizations, leading change, creating profitable cultures, and also developing the executive team. There's more, but those are kind of the basics. What I've seen in lately, because big companies, they often have big enough pockets that they can just wait out certain cycles. And so some people are really waiting out this time of uncertainty. They're not really sure where they necessarily want to invest. They don't want to lose a lot of money. And so they're kind of cutting back a little bit on some of I'd say, more forward approaches and innovation. And some have even cut some people so that they're running a little bit lean. They will hire some back, but they're going through a season where they're trying to save money in that way as they wait to see what's going to happen. It's not clear completely with the big companies what the impact is going to be of tariffs across the globe, how it will affect their partners, and they are thinking about those future partnerships because it's important not just to think about today, but also to think of the long term. So we'll talk more about that, but that's what I'm seeing.
Absolutely. can't agree more. The larger companies are definitely seeing more. They're able to sustain more time where they wait
Exactly.
as they determine. How about you, David? What are you all seeing in your neck of the woods?
Well, hi, I'm David Ogilvie, and we work with asset and inventory intensive businesses to help them improve their profitability. And we do that through the use of supply chain tools and technology, primarily ERP systems. Lisa, you and I have spoken a lot about this, and we seem to be at almost a 180-degree angle to the USA. We've got a bit of a two-speed economy at the moment in some respects. I was only speaking to one of the chaps that lives in my apartment block this morning, and he runs a logistics organisation, and the volumes for them have gone nuts. So he's extraordinarily busy with dealing with the amount of volume of goods that are being brought into the country. However, if we look at the manufacturing space here, we've got a leftist federal government, and they're running the economy in that manner. We've got a very strong renewables energy focus in this country, and our energy prices, electricity, gas primarily, are going through the roof. And as we all know, in the manufacturing space, that's a very key ingredient into input into what manufacturers use to produce their products. So if you're in the manufacturing space dealing with the renewable energy business, where a lot of the tax incentives and so forth in Australia are focused, well, then I think they're going quite well. There's also a lot of infrastructure work going on in my state, particularly. We've got the Olympics coming in 2032, so we're building stadiums and all of those sorts of things at the moment. So there's an enormous amount of government expenditure being spent into infrastructure. So if you are supplying to those projects, then you are doing well. But outside of that, there's an extraordinary number of organisations who are struggling. Bankruptcies across the building industry, for example, are at record highs. There's a lot of businesses going broke in this country. So we're at two speeds.
Yeah, well, it makes sense because we in the US we were really focused more previously the last several years on renewables and infrastructure, and there was a lot of spending going on from the government point of view, and in a way that's sort of flipped now, which and in combination with the tariffs to Dr. Karen's point of view, created some of the business instability early on. Although it looks like from the tariffs point of view, like things are leveling out at around, I mean, this is a global number, but about 15% overall. Of course, it can be dramatically different country by country, which, to Karen's point of view is, can complicate matters. So things are not simple when it comes to navigating business changes, but we are moving in a way from globalization towards more of a regionalization overall. However, we're not really ditching or changing like sources of supply. It's more that at this point anyway, companies are more adding or expanding more domestic and like regional, like Mexico, sources of supply is what I'm seeing.
Yeah,
And
let me
as
say
you and I have
something.
spoken for a while, we're the exact opposite to that in many ways, because
Yes.
we're still importing a lot of things. We've got a lot of inflation here still. You guys, your inflation rate is still dropping. Ours has gone back out. Our Reserve Bank put our cost of money up again at the last meeting. There's a lot of predictions about it going up again at the next meeting. So there's a lot of headwinds in there for organisations. Sorry, Karen, I spoke over the top of you then.
Well, I think, David, you and I have a similar view because since I'm working with global organizations, they are impacted by other markets besides the United States. And that does have an impact on what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, and the forward motion. And instead of bankruptcy with some of the big companies, they're actually acquiring other businesses. They are merging a little bit more to create some stability. And I think that what's happening as far as tariffs is that they cannot afford to look at things from an Americentric perspective because these other countries are their partners and they have to think about that and the impact. And if they don't make the right decisions, if you will, like I said, with the long term in mind, that can really break the company in some ways that might not happen if you're a little smaller company or more US centric. And so I think that it's not necessarily that these changes are all positive because they really have deep operations in other markets to a large capacity. And those tariffs are negatively impacting some of those markets.
So to that end, there's been a big move with the trade war, so to speak, between America and China, for example. There's been a big move for China to get, and it's got a lot more European business and trade happening at the moment. Now, for Australia, because we supply a lot of resources and those sorts of things, that's been a good thing because that's still been stable. There was a lot of concern and upheaval about potentially the resources industries dropping off because of the trade war with China and America. That hasn't come to fruition. So back to your base principle there, Lisa. There's a lot of volatility and uncertainty and angst around in the industries at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. And Diane, I know that we work with several global companies as well, although from a manufacturing perspective, like they've been moving products between sites as needed, to your point, Karen, to like optimize profit, and also are looking at like how they can to your point, how do they best be most efficient given all of these new evolving supply chains? And I do think that's a key for the future here is how do you determine and how do you set up your company for what's to come and it's not going to stop changing. I mean, to what degree it changes might change, but it's not going to stop changing. So I don't know, Diane, what, from that point of view,
I
do you have
think,
anything that you want to
yeah, I
add?
think the only thing I'll add are, well, there's two things. One of them is, like you said, that we're leveraging SIOP processes to kind of be able to see, like, where do you put that excess capacity, or how do you move around based on these demands? Because like it's not simple. There's a lot of demand flooding in certain facilities. Other facilities are not, utilized. So it's how do you like see these signals and these flags so that you can move the capacity where it needs to go. And then also, like Dr. Karen mentioned, the examples that I know of with our recent clients have been like extended lead times for things that are overseas, which then of course impacts, of course, those tariff costs. Of course, they have to absorb those things. And how is your supply chain configured at the moment? And how do you manage all these like extending lead times, shorten lead times, keep up with all of these changes that are occurring globally, as well as, these internal capacity decisions. So I think leveraging the SIOP process has been one of the key benefits for our clients to be able to see this stuff ahead of time.
I think
Definitely agree. Go ahead, Karen.
one thing I would say too is that mindset is really important in these times. And what I mean by that is when you have global partners and they're part of your everyday business, there's a sense where you really have to listen to them and partner and co-create together. You can't just mandate some things and expect that that's going to be successful. If you've got partners in these other countries, they need to see, the US partner as a partner and not as someone who's just taking advantage of a situation where we might benefit, but our country partners do not. I think that that is huge. And with a partnership mindset, I really think that some more innovative, creative, and successful options will emerge that thinking just alone over here, we might not think of. And if we don't do this partnership, we're going to lose people in the long term and erode trust so that tomorrow we won't have the same opportunities. So I think that's huge.
Agreed. And since you brought up partnerships, it reminds me, I just had a annual industry event with the Association of Supply Chain Management last week, and we talked about what we're seeing happening in the industry with different companies. And it was a common theme, the need for strategic partners, even though a lot of these folks were manufacturing, fewer distribution. But nevertheless, like one was a chip supplier as an example, and like even a low cost piece, if you don't have the low cost piece available, nothing is going to, you can't go forward with anything. So like we were talking about the importance of taking, gaining more control, but not in a way that's like through partnerships. Because, vertical integration is not something that most clients can do anytime soon. At the same time, like how do they better get their whole supply chain together? So I think strategic partnerships is really is a hot topic, at least in the US.
David, you're muted.
David, yeah, you're muted.
Beg your pardon, sorry about that. I don't know why that happened. But that's been a core issue or core challenge for supply chain managers for a very long time, hasn't it? It's about getting your sourcing policies correct and making sure that you're building that relationship and you're not just transactional and all those sorts of things. That's been a key issue for a while. And on your theme of mindset, Dr. Karen, I also think there's a lot of managers or a lot of executives that need to rethink their mindset around just in time. We've all seen the pendulum that just in time has been through, where it was, it was the flavor of the month and everybody thought it meant no inventory, and they just poorly understood that whole practice. Getting back to Diane's point about PSYOP, right? It's about making sure that you've got the right inventory in the right places at the right time. That's more of the outcome, and just in time is one of those tools that you pull out of the kit bag as and when you need to use it and how to use it.
Yeah, and a lot of the clients that we've been working with lately have been more engineering to order, configure to order, and so it's the inventory side of it is difficult or challenging when you don't have visibility to what purchasing can see. So a lot of the strategies we've been recommending and working through and designing with our clients have been, how do you bring up that visibility to the supply chain much earlier in the process? Because otherwise you won't have a shot at, these long lead times, and you won't have.
Well, particularly if they're in a design to engineer type environment, whether they've got to go and draw whatever it is the customer wants. There's no visibility in there until the design's complete, until what the bill of materials might even look like. And so then you've got the long lead time issues around that. So 100%. And it just seems to be, maybe it's a phase that we're going through in our business cycle. I don't know. But there seems to be a lot more activity happening in the fabrication type industries rather than the more traditional manufacturing, the discrete manufacturers that just keep punching out the same item every day. There seems to be a shift about where the activity is happening.
Yeah, we've definitely been working a lot with more of a custom manufacturer, because I think today's world not only is volatile and uncertain, but complexity has increased dramatically, not only because of the globalization that's happened over the last few decades, but also, even the simplest of processes have become more complex in organizations, but certainly in custom manufacturing. And so, like Diane said, the visibility has been a key issue that's come up many times. So it's how to think through that, and I think that's one of the things that as Dr. Karen brought up that topic, as far as how executives should be thinking about these, about this environment. One of them is to find ways to gain better visibility. In our case, we utilize PSYOP, so sales inventory operations planning, but there's other ways to gain visibility with the use of technology and AI and other advanced technologies.
The other point I'd make there, Lisa, too, is two of the the four key V's of my supply chain model, if you like. One is visibility, so that's absolutely critical. But for me, it's also the velocity, the speed at which that information is transferred across the supply chain. The quicker, the speed will also improve the visibility for your suppliers and those sorts of things. You know, what information are you sharing with them, and how quickly are you sharing with them? How frequently are you sharing it with them? That whole dynamic comes together to make that, you know, build that resiliency into the supply chain.
You know, one thing
Agreed. I mean, oh, go ahead, Karen.
I'd like to add to this is that because of what you're all saying and what David just said as well, is that organizations are having to make some key decisions, and they're decisions that are different than the kinds of decisions they've made in the past, just because the environment has shifted and changed. So where we have value is we have a lot of experience across different industries, across different decades, time periods. We know what works. We know where they can find the information, and we can help them to make better decisions no matter what's going on, because they've got to be able to predict a little bit in the future. They've got to anticipate some things. And sometimes within one company, you just don't know enough. And that's where we come in, because we're operating across industry and across years, and we have some perspectives that can help organizations make better decisions faster.
You're absolutely right. Actually, a client today just said exactly that, you know, given the experience, like they were, you know, we're thinking ahead so that they can be ahead of their, you know, competitors, because they didn't necessarily even know that this is the next step to come, to your point. So I think that is a key. And to your point, David, about fast, and Dr. Karen, you brought this up as well, is like providing the information for executives to make decisions quickly, but with directionally correct information. And that's, you know, again, why we come back to like programs like a SIOP process. It's not that SIOP is a magical process, but it's, you know, a week, there's a monthly cadence, a weekly cadence, getting input from appropriate resources. To your point, Dr. Karen, not all of them know what they don't know. So how do you bring that together with data, market conditions, and other factors, so that you can make sure that you don't wait for perfection, because you'll never make a decision, but that you gain directionally correct information. And then, you know, David, as you have on your side as well, like, you know, business intelligence, AI has, you know, certainly dramatically impacted like how you can slice and dice data quickly to be able to make these kinds of decisions once you get them set up properly.
But Lisa, there's also some 101 things there, as in very basic things, and that is your data capture. So getting real-time data capture happening within your organization, whether that be on the warehouse shop floor, whether it be on the factory floor, or wherever it happens to be. The minute that data becomes real and available, then it needs to be captured and made visible quickly.
Agreed. And Diane, I know that you've had some you know, clients that had their challenges really in connecting the data, right? To gain this visibility. And
Yeah, I
what do
think
you see there?
most of the clients have multiple systems. They're working with large data sets, but it's really kind of understanding how do you bring them all together and connect the information. You know, it's one thing to have all this data. There's always data integrity issues. There's always cleanup that's required, but usually, you know, you can get enough out of your system to make sense of it. Start with some particular groupings, kind of look for some key fields and some information around status or, you know, timing. It's really all about timing, status, and getting visibility to dollars and to products, and kind of bringing all of that data together. But, you know, and then you can build integrity into it over time and clean up what you need over time. But like Lisa mentioned, you want to make decisions quickly, so you can't wait for perfection. Usually it's always about starting with the smaller subset of the data and then designing in the process, and then figuring out how you can like connect this for the full data sets.
You know, I want to comment on that too, Diane, because I think that one of the things that I'm seeing in this climate is this almost fear of decision making because
Yep.
people don't know if they're making, quote, the right decision. And things are changing and the volatility is there. And I'm remembering a book, it's kind of an older book, real thin book by Peter Drucker that's called The Effective Executive. I have
Ah,
I've
yes.
referred many of my clients to that book. But one of the things he says in the book is that you make the best decision today, given the information you have today, and you realize that you can make a different decision tomorrow. So you get new data, you get new information, you get better information, then you can change and shift. And I think some people are inadvertently or unnecessarily, uh, I'd say, freezing themselves because they think they have to make a decision that's going to be perfect into perpetuity rather than I can decide today, oh, now we know something new, tomorrow let's shift again. So I think business is fluid and you can decide and then decide again.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Exactly. I mean, actually, that's the key, right? There's a
Yeah.
cadence to like the decision making. And that is actually the art of PSYOP because you don't have to be stuck with your decision. I mean, you make a collaborative decision, you like, you figure out it's directionally correct. You move forward because if you wait forever, you are going to be left in the dust. And then you revise. You're getting consumption information, you're getting feedback. That was the other thing I was going to add to what Diane said is there's a lot about data, and then you bring it to the people, and the people say, well, this doesn't make any sense. And then you figure out why, like what's going on. Or they say, yeah, this is right, but this tweak or that tweak. So you can't forget the people. It's got to be, the people with the data and
Well,
the
yeah, because
system, which
usually the folks who are involved and the experts involved will say, well, I can make a decision if I could see this about the data, or if I had this quicker about the data. So usually they're able to tell you like what visibility do they need around the data so they can make these decisions quicker. So you definitely
totally
don't,
true.
you definitely want their feedback into the process.
Totally true. I mean, and I know for sure, Diane, that's what you do so well, actually, is gain their perspective because you can have a very different forecast based upon what happens to be in the system today, and then you get feedback, and it's actually quite the challenge. I mean, more of a challenge in this volatile period of time than I think it's been in a while because you have a lot of quotes and orders and opportunities out there, and then do we expect them all to happen? How likely are they really to happen? Getting that feedback, and then are they executable? Like, can we actually make them happen, right? So it's like one of the things that I
Well, and I
know.
think a lot of what's happening too with a lot of organizations is they're upgrading their data, upgrading systems, implementing a lot of different tools, which is great. We have all these new, you can get a project management tool, you can get a BI tool, you can have an ERP system, you can have a quoting system. And so you have all these tools, but then how to bring them together and make sense of them. I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out like how do they use them where it becomes effective, because otherwise you're just buried in a lot of different systems and don't know how to use them together.
Yeah,
And I
that
really
is totally true. Go
I
ahead,
love,
Karen,
I
Dr.
love,
Karen.
Lisa, what you said about don't forget the people because, we have technology, we have AI, we have other kind of technology. And in order to use it optimally, like you're saying, Diane, it does require people and the strategic thinking that people bring, the knowledge of the experience, the ability to see um, how would I say, patterns and systems and to analyze the data in a different way or to know what kind of analysis to ask for next. That requires some people. And so I think businesses have to realize that even though we may have more robust tech tools, that doesn't mean that we really can operate most optimally or effectively without the people. And so I think that's a mistake that some companies might make in this time, and then they're going to fall behind because they didn't realize how important the people are to the process of moving forward.
Oh, that came up just today, right, Diane? I mean, in essence, how do you know what you're looking at, or how do you know what process is actually happening behind the scenes to figure out even what to purchase, for those situations where you have long lead items and you don't have visibility. So that really does go back to the people. That's what we were finding.
Well, but you've got to be able to dig in there and find out what is actually happening. Because how often do we, run a requirements session for an ERP selection, for example, and one level of the organisation says, well, this is how we run this particular process. And then you go and talk to a different level of the organisation. They go, oh, no, we don't do it that way. We do it this way. And there are all these hidden shadow processes that go on in an organisation, all being driven by somebody who either does or doesn't have the right tool and uses the tools that are available to them to get their job done, because they want to do a good job. So they go and grab a good job, a tool, whether it's the right tool or the wrong tool, in order to get that job done. And so the actual processes that are going on in a business are often not well understood at different levels within the organisation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's another conundrum really, because there's the retirement of the baby boomer generation, and actually I'm seeing a lot of early retirements of the next generation as well across clients, which is quite the challenge, because there is a lot of historical information in some of these resources. And so I think that is quite the challenge right now, is how do you get that information out and systematized, as well as, but not making it so that it's just an automated answer without like thinking about how to bring some expertise into the mix related to the industry. So, I mean, I don't know. I know, Diane, like that's something that you excel in. What are you seeing from that point of view?
I think that hopefully that those, like you said, those resources who are starting to retire and are hopefully passing their information along, or not just saying, do step 1, 2, 3, 4, but instead they're talking about how they make the decision. Like, what is the thinking behind the decision? What information are they looking for to make the decision or move forward? And you're kind of getting that thought process, because I think that's what's not carried forward. It's easy to say, well, I spent an hour or two showing them this spreadsheet. They're all set on making, being able to update it. And then the person retires and the conditions change. And all of a sudden everyone's like, I don't know what to do anymore. It wasn't the same steps. The variables have all shifted. So I would think that you're spending time with those experts to really understand like what they're looking for. How do they make the decision? What's the logic and thinking behind all of these spreadsheets or behind all of these processes?
I'm not sure how you guys are finding it over there, but here we've got a massive productivity problem. The economy is apparently constrained at about 1.8%. And the minute we go over 1.8% growth, we're just fueling inflation left, right, and centre. Now, governments aren't going to provide productivity initiatives quickly enough or strongly enough or of a robust enough effort. So business really is the channel that has to drive productivity, at least here in Australia, because we're very, very constrained. But then to your point, Diane, you've got all of these people who are retiring and so forth. How does a particular organisation improve the productivity within their own sphere when you're losing those people and when you don't have the tribal knowledge that's there? Sure, you go buy a new tool, but again, the tool's not just, everything. If you've got a nail, everything looks like a hammer, right? You don't use the tool correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well, I would add to. Go ahead, Diane.
A lot of time, what really happens in the consulting process, at least that we work with clients on, is how do you make a decision, kind of documenting like the start to finish, like how does something move forward? How do you flag something? How does someone see a flag from another department and then decide to make that decision with it? So it's a lot of it's like process mapping, but not getting so crazy detailed. It's like, what is the key information that's moving the order fulfillment process along? Or overall, how do you turn something in from a customer desire into a shipment and out the door for revenue? So it's usually like, how do you know how to make decisions along the way? And then kind of figuring out how do you add and optimize, add visibility, optimize to those different process steps and bring all of the different functions working along together.
That's a very important concept because it's going beyond just information, like this knowledge transfer that you're really talking about is information, and it's also wisdom that's
Mhm.
brought to the information. It's looking beneath the obvious surface to get underneath the surface so that no matter the conditions, even if the conditions change, it's like if you really understand how to do math, you can do a different math problem because you understand the fundamentals of math. But if you only understand the surface, when things change, you're not going to be effective. So again, it's back to people in the sense of what kind of knowledge transfer are we having? What are we sharing with people? What are we teaching as we go along? What's the wisdom part that goes with that as far as the decision making, so that they have not just an answer, but they have an understanding that they can apply to any situation.
And it's one of those situations in ERP implementations that's almost always ignored or handled poorly. And that's one of the reasons why so many of these system implementations fail to deliver what they should, is the knowledge transfer is not handled well enough, and the business does not learn enough about the system, to your point, Dr. Karen, the wisdom around how decisions are made and why those decisions are made at those times, around about how to use that tool.
No, you're absolutely right. The way I see it is that they train a lot of times in the ERP world, they train how to use a particular screen, step one, do this, step two, do that, but they don't talk about what's going on behind the scenes, what's the down the line impacts. And what many people want to know is, how do I get what I used to get to the customer? Like, what's my day-to-day look like in the system? And they don't know that. They don't answer that question.
Well,
So to your point,
the classic is they teach them all of the steps in the MRP on the screen, how you run the MRP on the screen and where to read the action messages. But nobody gives them the education underpinning the concept of MRP and what all the inputs mean, and how it operates and thinks, and what decisions need to be made. They just teach them the steps.
The other thing that
Diane-
we often
Go
do
ahead.
is how you do the typical steps. If you receive something, if you move, transfer something, you ship something, but then not all orders and things go correctly, so they don't know how to back things out or fix something that didn't go wrong to the perfect scenario. So a lot of times they're held with like, well, we don't know how to do all of these other scenarios. We only know how to do the perfection scenario. That only happens, 30-40% of the time. So
Yeah.
it's also that issue.
Diane and I are spending a significantly higher amount of time on education, to your point, because and how to build sustainability into our clients, because it's essential. Because really, if you're basing your business on results, the only way to get those results is to ensure that the teams know how to perform and answer these questions on their own. But to your point, Dr. Karen, it's not so simple, because you're talking about what process. Well, there is a what step should I take, but then there's what's going on behind those steps, and then there is like, how do you address this with changing conditions? And we just got through saying that this webinar is about volatility and change. So as these changes occur, you not only need to know what's going on behind the decisions and what all the steps are, but what do you do about it if in these new set of conditions? So it's, we're finding that that's like a really valuable reason to, like you said, to bring in consultants like all of us, but it's also, other resources. The clients that are most successful are finding ways to fill those. Like, it's not just education and training, but it's also like giving them the ability to gain experience across different like functions, across different like role types. But it's not so easy to do when you're trying to be profitable and make sure you can get everything out the door for the
Lisa,
month, to meet the month.
In an ERP environment, like, I mean, you and I both know that almost every partner out there or software vendor is going to give you the train the trainer model, right? And the train the trainer model is dramatically flawed. It's got flaws all through it, and the only problem is, the only other option is you adopt an apprentice type arrangement, right? Whether somebody is apprenticed to somebody for a period of time. But in that sort of circumstance, you don't have the time or the space. You don't have the 4 years for an apprenticeship, right? You need to get the system in and up and running, and people know how to use it. So they're really the only two options. So I think, the work I do with my clients in that space is making sure that we get that train the trainer model, which has to be used in that circumstance, but making sure that it's more outcome based. And we're not just tick the box to say, we've done this session now. Let's go look at how much they've learned. Can they do this on their own? How much hesitation is there when they're going to do the steps? How quickly do they know this? How fluent are they? All of those sorts of things.
I'm thinking about something like, back in the day, like if you go back to school, earlier grammar school years, and you learn basic math, let's say, and then not only do you have to do basic math, they give you a math problem that is couched into some realities of everyday life, and you have to use the math skills to address the problem and come up with an answer or solution that is real world. And so I think that that's the flexibility that we're all talking about that needs to be built into, as you're saying, David, this train the trainer model with the outcomes and included. You're testing, can they take the math that they've learned, I'm using that as a metaphor, and apply it to a real world situation, and not just a world situation, but many real world situations that are different. And if they can't do that, they haven't really learned math at the level that they need to know it in order to be successful.
And this environment
Very true.
is really requiring that skill set because the conditions are changing every 6 months. You have more demand, not enough demand. You have products that are, booming, products that aren't booming. You have all these changing conditions happening constantly now. So you have to have that skill set in your organization.
Mhm.
Well, and we're really finding that even some high skilled resources or higher skilled resources are not asking all the right questions because there's just so much going on and there's so many balls in the air that even some long-term like planners that had good management experience are like missing some key things. I mean, it's easy to do because there's so much data now and there's many more tools, right? You can utilize artificial intelligence and you have to, because you have to do some things faster, but you also have to know if it's giving you crazy results. So it's I think it's more interesting yet challenging times, and we have to find ways to navigate
I
these.
think Dr. Karen brought up the mergers that are occurring and the consolidation and changes that are happening with all these different industries and organizations that, you're absorbing different product lines and different, unknowns that you don't have all the historical knowledge. You don't have all of these, unknown things. So you have to make decisions with what you do have, but you have to have some of the basics. I think the way David put it was like, you have these 101s. So what are the basic things that you need to make enough of a decision, get better over time, like I think Lisa said, and then, you're going to have to keep working because it's going to change again when you absorb another one or you have another change in your customer demand or whatever may happen. So
Well, the whole M&A scenario is fraught with other dangers as well, right? So you're bringing two different cultures together that may or may not mix, and you've got that level of stress, if you like, to manage. But you're probably, those two organizations are running different systems, right? Different software systems and all of those sorts of things. And so then there's that to deal with. So, the M&A is not necessarily the panacea that they think it is. They rarely bring the result or the improved delivery and the efficiencies that they are sold on. And then there's all of these other problems. So, while times are tough and they might be bringing those organizations together as a means of counteracting that in its own way brings in another series of problems that they need to deal with.
It's certainly going to make it more complex. I mean, I remember back to when I was working with a family-owned business. We absorbed a large company, a very large company, a division of them, and a small entrepreneurial one. And it was like, and went live with the new system. And it was quite the effort just to get back to one order, one invoice, one
Yeah.
shipment was not nearly as easy as it sounds. And then that's without even talking about, something that's probably in Dr. Karen's like heart here, but merging cultures from with a entrepreneurial side to it, a different one with more of the process oriented, but also a little bit bureaucratic side of things, and how to like take the best of both, and the best of all three, really. And the same thing can happen though, whether even if you're just working with multiple sites, like how to take the best of all of these sites slash people, and make everybody a win-win, turn it into a win-win-win. I always like to say like 1 + 1 + 1 should equal 33 instead of 3. That's not easy to accomplish, but that's what I think is expected today. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is, David, you mentioned the productivity. I think it is like we are on diametrically opposite poles here, because in the US, the productivity has actually increased pretty dramatically in the last couple of quarters, higher than it's been in many, many years. With that said, though, it's largely AI, um, and folks retiring, but that's like there's dangers here, right? Because you can't just go with what AI is telling you or what ERP is telling you. You have to, find a way to make, the best of both here somehow.
Well, I think a lot of people are banking on AI as the productivity tool. It's going to be the panacea to our productivity problems. I don't subscribe to that. I don't think that's, while it will be a contributing factor, I don't think it's going to be as big a productivity improvement tool as they think. And the reason for that is to get these things right requires an enormous amount of human interaction with the tools to get the explainability, if you like, of the result of the AI tool. You've got to be able to trust what it's bringing you. And in order to do that, you've got to understand how the AI tool has developed the recommendation that it's making. And while the humans are busy trying to decipher out that explainability piece, I think it's going to take a long time, whether that's 2, 3 years or whatever it happens to be, to really be able to build that trust. And in that meantime, that whole industry is changing. Now, I don't think that there's any guarantee that the tools and the platforms that are being used for AI at the moment are going to be the ones that we're going to be using in 2 or 3 or 5 years' time. And so that whole series of flux, again, getting back to that volatility piece for today's discussion, that is another piece of volatility that organizations need to deal with. Okay, they could blindly just accept what AI is telling them, but I think they'd be very naive and stupid to do that.
And I mean, they're building it into a lot of the ERP systems, but also peripheral tools. And then there's AI engines that will create their own, so that some software as a service has actually gone down recently because folks are creating their own, CRM systems, if you will, that actually are better than some of the ones that are out there. However, to your point, it's not as easy as it's cracked up to be. I tend to think that the winners are going to separate from the losers. The winners are going to have to do everything right here, from leadership, execution, use of technology, PSYOP. I mean, they're going to do everything right, and then unfortunately there's a lot folks who are waiting too long or going too fast, and they don't necessarily, or don't have the resources, or aren't willing to invest. They're gonna really struggle. So I think the winners are gonna separate from the losers in the coming years, more so than any other time in history. I don't know, what do you all think?
Well, I'm going to say something extremely controversial, so let me warn you now. Okay. When I'm thinking about productivity in the United States, there's also another element that we have to think about, and this is a parallel process to what I think is also happening for global companies that are operating in different countries. And that is the US, for example, that productivity is not necessarily across the board in this sense. There are people of color, for example, who have been disenfranchised in terms of being able to participate in the economy because there was differential impact on the loss of jobs for certain segments of the population and the ability to get new jobs going forward. And even on the consulting end, some companies, because of the climate that's being set in the United States, really feel as though they're going to be penalized and punished, by our administration if they do too many partnerships with people of color because it's just not popular right now. So, what's going to happen with all of these people who have been edged out of the job market? How will that expertise and how will that labor that's possibly available, how will it get back in? How will the intelligence that's there be utilized? And that's looking at the US and our specific problem. But now, if you apply that same lens to, okay, so we're the US, we're having this experience. David's already said in Australia it's different. What if Australia was a partner of some big company here or France or wherever? We've got to think that everybody's not experiencing the same thing. And we have to recognize that as a reality and as a part of how we make some decisions going forward.
Well, I mean, it's very true. I mean, we're a very diverse country. I mean, just speaking from the manufacturing side of things, there's been a significant change over the last like 30 years where we used to have robust opportunities. And a lot of those have disappeared, really. I mean, we've dramatically reduced the amount of manufacturing we do in the US versus like China, as an example. And so that has had, kind of like come to a head, if you will. And now with the geopolitical risks, it's starting to swing back in the other direction. But to your point, Dr. Karen, it's not so easy because it's not as though people who, I don't know, like want to work in an office in a certain condition are going to want to like go back into, a traditional factory job. With that said, there are now AI enabled factories and there's like a whole new way of looking at things. So it's by no means going to get simpler. It's definitely more complex and you have to deal with the people element is huge. It's like, I don't know, the merging in a way of people and technologies is kind of what I'm seeing, but totally agree. It's like going to be interesting to see how it goes. Diane, I see you're nodding. What do you think? It's a tricky topic.
All these layers and changes. I know like David was mentioning, the AI. I don't know. I think the AI thing is one of those, it depends on the situation. I do find it useful in my own work and working with clients. Clients have told me scenarios of how they use AI, and I think it's an interesting, they're throwing in different pieces of information and asking questions about it. So I think it's like a case by case basis where they end up bouncing off of another colleague. They have this tool that they can ask questions about. Hey, what do you think about this data? What is it telling you? What are the trends in it? Which I think can be very helpful for companies. But on the other hand, yeah, I do find that there are limitations, but it does seem like it's happening at a very fast rate. I mean, I think things that, like, I think we're so used to things happening and oh yeah, we can now find this in our email. We can now ask it to create a PDF. We can now have it read a PDF. Like it's happening and we kind of forget how quickly it's come through, but it's only within the last year and a half that we've had all of these advancements. So I can't imagine a year and a half from now, given how smart it's become and just seeing how I've used it.
The word of warning I would say there though is all of the AI tools that we're using at the moment are based on LLMs. Now, Lisa mentioned before that the ERP companies are embedding them into their software, and she's quite right, they are. My question is, the key is in the name, LLM, large language models. So language of words. And so the agents and the AI tools are very good at using, understanding and deciphering words. So we were talking before about predictions and trends and so forth. That's more about pattern recognition than it is understanding the math, because the AI tools don't actually do math, because it knows 1 and 1 is 2 because of all of the documents that it learned from on the internet. Now, if we were, for example, to flood the internet with documents and so forth that say 1 and 1 is 30, very shortly afterwards, the AI tools will be telling us that 1 and 1 is 30. It doesn't actually understand, getting back to your point, Karen, about math, right? So it's all about the words that it uses and pattern recognition in those words. Right? That's what it does. What is the most next likely outcome in this pattern? What is next likely to come up? And so when we're talking about using it from a mathematical perspective, demand forecasting, I think I've told you before, I had a client that was using a machine learning tool from Microsoft about improving their demand forecasting. They gave that away to go back to the statistical modeling tools that they were using before because it was giving them more realistic forecasts. Because the AI tools at the moment aren't good with numbers.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's interesting because there's like the human learning, or is that what they call it? Anyway, like you said, the recognition of patterns and trends, and then there's like the agentic AI, so it's starting to do things with this data. But to your point, I don't know. I think it's going to be an interesting period of time. I really do think that the most successful organizations are going to embrace some, like the advanced technologies, but they're going to equally, if not more so, embrace the people, to Dr. Karen's point of view, and they're going to figure out how to do that at the same time. I mean, one of the things I'm worried about in particular is like the fact that there's fewer newer grads that are being hired in some of the professions that it might be because they're thinking that AI can replace them, but if you don't train somebody to like say, AI, you're off track here, how are you ever going to get that replaced as people retire? So like, we're going to have to,
100%.
we're going to have to evolve there over time. But I do think that the most successful companies will have to embrace both. So it'll be
I think it's
interesting to
important
see.
to understand where these agents and things have been taught. What have they been taught on? And that's that apprenticeship. Like you hire somebody, for example, right? You've got to go into their background. Where have they got their skills from? What experience do they have? You do this with humans now, and I think it's going to be the same with AI tools. That you need to understand where it's got its knowledge from. Where is it learning from? Because they learn, but where from? Because it mightn't be what you need it to know. And so there's
Well,
no
this has
guarantee
been
that Microsoft or Oracle or SAP have taught this thing properly.
Lisa just taught it that 1 + 1 + 1 is 33. So now
That's
it'll.
right.
Exactly.
And I've said that in many articles. So like, who knows, it's going to start thinking that.
Yeah.
So, to your point, it is, well, and I wasn't even going to go there because it could take too long. But some of what Dr. Karen said, it could be, taught, who knows what it could be taught. So I would say like, this has been a wide ranging discussion, which is good, though. It's like you have to start thinking. You can't just hide your head under the sand. You have to start thinking about in these volatile, uncertain times.
What do you do?
What are we going to do to be the successful instead of the ones that are going to be absorbed by the successful companies. So I guess with that said, let's like maybe we'll go around and give like one last piece of advice slash whatever you want to say, concern, perhaps, whatever's on top of your mind. So let's see who wants to go first. We'll let you guys choose.
I'll go first because one of the reasons I rebranded to Ogilvie.ai was the AI stands for actual intelligence, and it's about us giving clients the real actual intelligence that we have to bring to the table. And so, in these volatile times, having a good coach or sounding board or somebody who has been through the trenches is absolutely critical in my opinion, and that's why we're here.
Very good. I like it. So I don't know, Diane, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I would just say it's been good to talk with all of you, and I've learned, I always learn from each of you, and it's always good to, I myself think, oh yeah, I have to think differently about XYZ. So just thank you for, doing the panel. And I would just say, given what we're seeing with clients in the recent weeks, last month, that there are going to be more challenging times ahead this year because things are starting to take off in the US.
Yeah. Challenging / opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Karen, how about you?
Yes, I would just say in summary to remember that in this moment of opportunity, what we've been saying all along is the combination of people and technology, and we have to be careful to not go backwards. In other words, to remember the partnerships and the win-win opportunities going forward, to remember the value of diverse people and diverse experiences and perspectives, because in the US, as we are cutting out certain voices, we are going to lose knowledge and wisdom that's needed in the current environment. And so I think we have to be cognizant of that, that it's more than just information. We're really talking about curating wisdom and transferring that wisdom and the decision-making ability. And our roles are even more critical because of the breadth of experience that we have that we can bring for perspectives to our clients. So it's an exciting time, and we don't want to get short-sighted and think only short term. We want to think both short and long term.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think I would summarize this to say, from a supply chain point of view, like AI fueled PSYOP is some of the more leading indicators here. If we can create a process so that you don't have to like go by the seat of your pants, if you will, but instead we have a cycle and a cadence that's a weekly, monthly process that utilizes technology to bring data together, to provide some information for decision making, but then most importantly, bring it together in a way that's collaborative with demand and supply teams, so that you can get the right flags and you can say, hey, this makes no sense, before we bring it to the executives and recommend whatever. We buy a new machine that could be millions of dollars, but that's not the best idea. Instead, we should do XYZ, whatever it is. But nevertheless, like coming up with a process and but yet embracing new technology. It's really not, like you said, it's not the simplest of times, but I believe that those that proceed in a way that's innovative, collaborative, like to your point, Dr. Karen, considering all voices, because the people on the floor from a manufacturing point of view, or the planners that you are ignoring, could have many times, actually, oftentimes have the answers that we're looking for, but they don't necessarily know how to say it, or they don't know that they have the answer. So we have to get it to that point. What'd you say, David?
Or they're not listened to.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure.
Yes,
They're not
that
listened
too.
to.
Yes.
I have a classic example, actually, that to maybe wrap it up, because it does kind of tie this whole topic together. There's this client that I worked with, and I found out that she was like really knew what she was doing, but no one thought she knew what she was doing. And so, but I'd ask any number of questions as a consultant, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we tried that 10 years ago," and she'd pull out some papers. And like, she would say, "Oh yeah, it didn't work for this reason or that reason." So all we had to do was say, "Well, what about this or that?" And she'd be like, "Oh, sure, that would work." But no one thought she knew what she was doing. So one day I got her approved to go to a class, an ASCM class that allowed her to have the right words to go with it. And then like after the class, they were like, "Oh yeah, she like learned so much. She knows what she's doing now." I'm like, "She knew all this all along. She just didn't know how to tell you." Or you didn't hear her. You weren't listening. So good to all your points, like make sure you're paying attention to your underutilized assets that you didn't even know were the most important assets, and that's your people. So, well, very good. Well, it's been, time always flies by, and we'll join together again next quarter to talk about whatever is the most timely topic going on. If you have suggestions, please send them our way. We want to live by what we're saying in our webinar here. So we're happy to take your requests. And thank you all for joining us again, and check us out on our GSCTT, Global Supply Chain Think Tank webpage. And that way you can get in contact with us all. And thank you. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes, thank you very much.